I rented a room in the house I grew up in, just to see if I could still hear the sounds in the attic. I'd always heard that certain individuals, after experiencing traumatic events during their childhood, would unconsciously block them out, sometimes going years without remembering them, a condition called dissociative amnesia. But I had never, ever, in my wildest dreams, expected that I would be one of those individuals. That is, until one day, when I was cleaning out the attic of the new house that my wife and I had just bought, a memory suddenly popped into my head. It was of me, as a young boy, tossing and turning in my bed at night, terrified by the sounds I had heard coming from the attic, directly above my second-floor bedroom. That's odd, I thought to myself, unfamiliar with such a memory, and skeptical that it had actually happened. That's when they all came rushing back to me. Memory after memory of my childhood self, cowering under my blanket in the dark, terrified by the strange noises that I'd heard emanating from the attic, night after night. Fuck, I thought to myself, as I began to recall those events actually happening to me. And so, I eventually resolved to believe that all of the memories were in fact actually real. But what I couldn't quite make sense of was why hearing those sounds was so traumatic, that they had caused me to block them away for 20 years. So I did what any right-minded person would do, and attempted to suppress them again. But I guess the mind has a mind of its own, and no matter what I did, I couldn't stop thinking about the sounds that I'd heard as a child. And after about a week of marinating, reflecting, and meditating on what had happened, way back then, the memories became even more clear, and I remembered that the sounds weren't just subtle noises. They were distinct and wide-ranging, from creaks and scratches in the floorboards to whispers and moans in the night. But what could have caused such sounds, I wondered. That's when I came to the same conclusion that my childhood self had come to. The home must have been haunted. Yes, that must have been it, I thought to myself. Cursed by some evil spirit, forever doomed to terrorize its residents, which meant that the spirit could still be there, I reasoned, before once again, attempting to move on. Weeks went by as I attempted to go back to business as usual, but no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't help but wonder whether the spirit, the source of those terrifying sounds, was still out there, 190 miles away, in my suburban Massachusetts hometown. Eventually, I gave in to my curiosity. There's only one way to find out, I thought to myself, before searching for the home's address online. See, the thing is, my parents didn't live there anymore, having sold the house 5 years prior, and bought another home in a more upscale part of the same town. I, on the other hand, had moved out even earlier than them, having moved to New York City after college. So, after quickly finding the house I grew up in on a popular vacation rental website, I logged into my account, booked a night's stay, and waited patiently for the host to get back to me. Sure enough, a few hours later, my booking was accepted, and the host sent me a warm welcome message. The only catch was the fact that the room they were renting wasn't my childhood bedroom on the second floor, but our former guest bedroom on the first. Possible to rent the upstairs bedroom on the left of the staircase? I grew up in the home and would love to go down memory lane, I messaged honestly on the rental site's app, to which the host replied, "Unfortunately, we converted that bedroom into a storage room. It's filled with a lot of our junk." "Is there enough space to sleep on the floor?" I asked, going out on a limb. "Are you sure? If you're paying the same rate, it'd make no difference to us." "I'm sure. Thank you." week later, I was on a bus to Boston. 5 hours after that, I was on a commuter rail to the South Shore. An hour later, I was picking up my rental car. And 30 minutes after that, I was stepping into my childhood bedroom, which, sure enough, had been converted into a storage room, junk strewn everywhere. This will do, I thought to myself, as I tossed a comforter on the floor and made a makeshift bed. Aren't you going to visit us while you're in town? My mom asked over the phone, after I told her I was in town for the night. Won't you please spend the night with us tomorrow? All right, I agreed. Fine. I'll stay with you tomorrow. You know you could stay with us tonight too, right? What are you doing renting a room there? My father pried after my mother handed him the phone, trying his best to understand why on earth I would do that. I didn't blame him. For nostalgia's sake, Dad. Now, please tell Mom. It's just one night, and I'll stay at your place tomorrow night. Fair enough, he said. See you tomorrow. See you tomorrow, Dad. I spent the next few hours just lying in bed, waiting patiently for nightfall, as I distracted myself on my phone until the sun finally set, and I turned off the light, put down my phone, and stared up at the ceiling, my ears at the ready. But after about an hour of silence, I started to grow tired, and my eyes slowly began to close as I drifted off to sleep. Until suddenly, out of nowhere, a noise woke me from my doze, and I snapped to attention. Sure enough, it was coming from the attic. It was a loud rattling sound that seemed to be happening intermittently. There it is, I thought to myself as I jumped up to my feet. It's not the exact sound I remember hearing, but it must be related. So I set off to find out, tiptoeing my way out of the room and down the hall to the staircase that led to the attic, careful not to wake the hosts as the sound grew louder and louder. And as I ascended the staircase, with each step I took, the sound continued to grow louder and louder and louder, until I eventually reached the door to the attic. Standing there, shaking, ready to confront my traumatic childhood experience head on, I gathered the courage to reach for the door and willed myself to open it. But when I cracked open the attic door and looked inside, it was empty. Now, truth be told, I had never been courageous enough to venture up to the attic as a kid, but I had a pretty good feeling that my parents hadn't kept it as pristine and sparse as the new owners had. Its walls bare, its floors spotless. But as empty as it was, that didn't change the fact that I could still hear the sound, which was louder than ever. If not from the attic, where the fuck is that noise coming from, I wondered, before a different noise rang out in the dark. Everything okay? I heard someone say, completely startling me and causing me to jump. I peeked my head out of the attic door and down the set of the stairs to find the host at the foot of the staircase in her nightgown. Sorry. I heard a noise coming from the attic, I explained, as I shut the attic door behind me and climbed down to her, my body still shaking, my heart still racing. I used to hang out up here as a kid, but I don't recall hearing any sound like that. Oh, you must be talking about the weather vane on the roof? We had it installed when we moved in. She stopped and listened. Yeah, I guess it is pretty loud now that you mention it. Sorry about that. We can give you a discount if you want. Oh, it's no bother, I replied, before saying goodnight to her and returning to my room, where I attempted to hear anything but the sound of the newly installed weather vane. But I never ended up hearing the sound I was looking for. And when I woke up the next morning, I felt a certain sense of defeat. And so, I checked out of the house resolving to give up my search as I backed my rental car out of the driveway of my childhood home, looked up at the weather vane in disappointment, and headed off to my parents' new house for the night. Having grown up my entire life in the previous home, my parents' new place always felt alien to me whenever I visited. Sure, my parents lived there and that was nice and all, but it just wasn't the same. So it should come as no surprise that I couldn't wait to get out of there the next day, so I could return my rental car, get back to Boston, and catch a train back to NYC. That night, after a hearty home-cooked meal with my mom and dad, I retired to their guest room and passed out early, exhausted from what I'd now accepted was a fruitless journey. But a few hours later, I suddenly awoke in the middle of the night to chilling sounds coming from the attic. But they weren't like weather vane. No, in fact, they were the very sounds that I used to hear coming from the attic as a child. But how could that be? I thought to myself. Could the evil spirit have somehow followed my parents from the old home and now be haunting this one? It was a terrifying thought which chilled me to the core. But all I knew was, after coming up empty-handed at the rental, there was no chance that I wasn't going to investigate the very sounds that I had been looking for. So just like I had done the night prior, but now in a different home, I ascended the stairs to the attic as the sounds got louder and louder and louder until once again, I gathered the courage to reach for the attic door and willed myself to open it. I closed my eyes, completely expecting that when I opened them, I'd see a ghastly spirit lurking about. But when I cracked open the attic door and looked inside, I discovered something far more terrifying. I saw about 10 individuals, their mouths gagged and their arms and legs tied up with rope, as they wriggled around on the attic floor, causing the very creaking and scratching noise that I'd heard as a child. And all around them, plastic tarps covering the objects and furniture that were scattered throughout the attic. I couldn't believe my eyes. My mind began racing. Wait, if these hostages, victims, kidnapped people were the source of the sounds I'd heard as a child, how could they possibly have gotten to this house? That's when it hit me. My mother, or my father, or both? I thought long and hard about it, and despite what I saw in front of me, I just can't bear to believe that they... No, that can't be. But before I could dwell on the thought, something caught my eye. It was the captives, having been alerted to my presence, all staring back at me, their eyes wide in horror, their gagged mouths attempting to scream what I can only imagine was the word help. Having never been in a situation like that before, I simply froze, unsure of what to do next, until I eventually realized that I better not stay up there a moment longer, and began to slowly back away, unable to take my eyes off the helpless strangers as I stepped out onto the staircase, closed the attic door behind me, and headed straight for the guest room. What the fuck do I do now? I wondered as I paced around the room. That's when I heard a knock. My heart began pounding as I walked up to the door and opened it to find my father, standing there in his pajamas, yawning and scratching his head. Son, did you just go up to the attic? My palms started sweating. I paused for a moment before replying. No, why? I could have sworn I heard someone go up there. Nope. Why would I do that? I was wondering the same thing. Okay, well, I better get to bed. Of course, he said. Night, son. Night, Dad, I replied. I began to shut the door over, but before I could close it, his hand reached in and stopped it. "You know, son, if you did go up to the attic, you can tell me, you know." I had no idea what he meant by that cryptic sentence. All I knew was it was suspicious as fuck. "Course, Dad. I'll keep that in mind if I ever go up there." "Good," he said with a smile before his face turned serious. "But also, don't go up there." "Got it, Dad," I replied, feigning confusion. "Night, son," he called out as I watched him head back to his bedroom through the crack in the doorway before I closed it completely. I sat down on the guest bed as my mind began to race again. But I've stayed here before and never heard the noises. How could that be? I wondered, before more memories started pouring back to me. Memories of visiting my parents at their new home in my adulthood and hearing the same noises I had heard as a child. That's when I realized that not only had the dissociative amnesia been blocking out the sounds I had heard as a child, but it had been blocking out every memory of the sounds right into my adulthood, until I stepped foot into my own attic and the memory floodgates were opened. Knowing now that either one or both of my parents had been consistently kidnapping and imprisoning innocent people in their attic over the course of 20 years and across 2 houses, I started to panic. And as my heart began to beat faster and faster, and I grew short of breath, I suddenly collapsed onto the floor and started to shake, half in horror of what I'd just seen upstairs, and half in disbelief that my parents could do such a thing. Keep it together, just get out of here, I thought to myself, before regaining my composure, packing my bags, and sneaking out of my parents' new house in the middle of the night. I slept in my car that night and woke up to see an incoming call from my mom, which I let go to voicemail. "It's your mom. I saw that you were gone when I woke up this morning and just wanted to wish you a safe trip back," she said, as I played back the message. But after knowing what I knew, I couldn't bear to return the call. Instead, I returned my rental car, took the commuter rail back to Boston, and hopped on the first train back to NYC. Still unable to bring myself to call my parents, so here I am, sitting here, torn between 2 decisions. Call the police and save all of the people tied up in my parents' attic, at the expense of turning in my father or mother, or possibly both of them. Or do what I apparently do best and block it out for another 20 years. Aha! You survived the story. Think you can handle how deep, dark, and disturbing the rabbit hole goes? Click on the playlist and let me know in the comments where your breaking point is.